not all the listeners are present yet, but the hall is going to be filled when we start, and now it's logical continuation of the conference. We translate into more practical field. The conference on investment in CEE regional is based on the principle from general to, we started with macroeconomics and general climate, and now the issues continue for investors of a more global level, studying the markets of debt instruments and stock markets. And now the sections from 5 to 7 will be dedicated to practical aspects about what's happening at the level of business and entrepreneurs that raise investment and financing into their projects. So practical section is split into two parts. Venture projects. In this section, we'll talk about venture investments, venture projects related to IT and technologies, where we are at. And next session, venture investing in areas not related to IT. So today, here we got together this table with some key participants of the market of venture investments, operate not only in Russia, and consider their activities on Central Eastern Europe. CEE, historically, have common parameters and properties about types of investments and types of projects into consideration of investment companies and funds can consider as a common region. So now I'll introduce you briefly the speakers who will tell about their activities in their small presentations, and after that, in the regime of questions and answers, we can discuss some urgent issues. Damian Doberstein, e.Ventures company partner, Maxim Krasnykh, Intel Capital, Althouse Group, Rostislav Shatinok, Alexander Chachava, LETA Group, and Gennady Margalit from the Department of Moscow Exchange, MISEX, that currently a very serious formulated strategy and working in this market. And Aidar, Kaliev, head of venture investing of VTB Capital. So probably this session would be logically to start from general to particular. So I would propose the first presentation to Gennady Margalit, if he doesn't mind, so that he tells about more general view on this market. Thank you. Honestly speaking, I don't mind, because it's good to say from the beginning and then you can relax. I'm not sure that it's right to start with my presentation, because I wanted to speak on some particular issue on infrastructure and some part related to stock exchange. And honestly, I'm more like a stock exchange person rather than representative of venture industry, but we relate. But it doesn't matter. After this introduction, I'll tell you that the stock exchange is doing for Russian venture market and how it may be useful to venture funds, private equity, and emerging companies, etc. So I have a number of slides. It's easier. But if you are bored, I'm ready to answer questions. So, about infrastructure, that specifically we are talking about some segments that stock exchange created in order to help innovative venture capital companies to come to public market, get financing, and turn into blue chips, and work with fuel companies that are represented in the market. So that's a virtuous task. First is client for it's important for market exchange and fuel companies, and we need some alternative high technology. On the other hand, it is associated with a policy and which is set, and it's appropriate to move from the raw materials economy to economy based on something else, knowledge, brains, etc. So therefore, this sector has been configured that way, so that on the one hand it's stock exchange phenomena within the stock exchange and technologies is not very different from other trades, and Gazprom traded similarly as other companies on a market of innovation and investment. Plus we have some packaging within coordination council with state representatives, ministries, and Duma and the Federation Council that shows this association with the government and helps to bring some important signals to the government and state in order to change regulatory environment, which is very friendly for innovative companies. So coordination company with Ms. Chuba is in charge of it, I need to mention, and representatives of other profile ministries, finance, etc. are included as. So today, that's a three-step process. We have a segment with the public part for companies that go to the stock exchange and are in line with all requirements, so-called RE2. This is a site for, and now it is positioned for funds that are not ready yet to get access to trade to retail investors. Only qualified investors can be traded there. And finally, the youngest segment, IPO board, which is outside of the stock exchange, some resource that a year ago and was anniversary was created in order to work with companies, venture companies, not public, which are not ready to go to public sector. I will not dwell into details regarding environment. We already achieved something. There are some tax preferences and compensations to issuers. The most important that this background is becoming more favorable, and the state is moving forward to young innovative companies, and not in words but in terms of specific decisions, normative acts, legislation, etc. So what we have today, we have 36 issues and open stock, no, just 27 foundations, and a week ago we got bonds and corporation Rosnana, which bonds got into our elite sector, showing the commitment to innovation sector. So a couple of words, what we have quite differentiated composition. All innovative industries are represented, not only IT and internet, but whatever, biotechnologies and pure technologies, alternative energy, etc. So this relation of foundations and stocks represented on this picture. Now, some other facts and figures about this segment. For us, important issue is liquidity. How companies are traded. They come to the stock exchange in order to get some liquidity. And investors, so this slide shows that the company is traded not so bad. The volume of trading goes up in spite of the fact that, the volume of trades declined around the world, in Europe and in Russia in particular. But on our segment, if we take the first quarter, the amount of trades related to first quarter 2013 increased 2.5 times due to activization and new companies entering. Last year, 10 companies and 6 are full-scale IPOs. In terms of Russian market, and we compared here liquidity and trades on our sites with similar sites, West, AIM, NASDAQ. So trades are not so bad. The important issue is behavior of prices after placement. And here the picture is not so optimistic. And we all know that Russian companies are well known that they sell well with good multipliers, and then there is a serious decline of prices, especially after ending of stabilization period, and we are not exclusion here. Here we are together with a world trend. We declined. So if we take NewConnect, a Polish platform, it is similar. Companies are entering, and then there's a constant decline of prices. However, what we have today, if we look at the companies all over all these trades, above placement price is more than those than below placement price. However, it's a pity that these companies are included in the index, so the index behavior is not so representative. And the companies of the recent times, I don't see Aidar here, out of 12 companies, practically all except one that was included in the index is traded above placement, which also has some explanations. Got over the greed. Companies understand that it's not necessary at any price to sell to investor, and a number of other circumstances. So they learn to work with investors, and which is important to implement not only some investment programs, but work actively with investors, IR, PR. It's all important, market making. According to those companies, the situation changed, and now more closely to the topic of venture industry. As I said, we work on it not only with public, but venture companies created a platform that helps us to prepare non-public companies to future public activity. This is IPO board, which is 3-level, starting from startups, advanced already with professional investors, business angels, and pre-IPO companies. Now we have, for a year, 148 companies in this platform, and the picture a week ago we celebrated anniversary. Mr. Chubais was there too. 223 investors, including all funds, Russian-based, accredited professional participants, consultants, investment boutiques working with the companies, preparing them to accept investors, etc. So we have this quite long vertical covering, starting with startups and ending with public sector, where in our part we help companies to become better and raise investment from venture funds and grow and turn into some public stories in the future. So I'm ready to speculate why venture private equity funds need it. So I think that at least three important functions of our infrastructure. First, at entry. There is entry and exit, and trading itself. So exit is clear. It's obvious for all that funds are interested at certain time to exit more efficiently via public market. Maybe not all of them, but at least this platform exists and develops. And makes it easier for other funds to enter. We have some pipeline for entry, which is also interesting, and funds look at this pipeline. And yeah, there are some contradictions here because funds doesn't like publicity. However, there is some close regime where companies are accessible to funds without this semi-publicity. We are talking about IPO board. But in public mode, if the asset is interesting, the fund is also looking at it and ready to enter at some point. So the point of entering, that investors receive some filtered pipeline with some minimal initial expertise, which makes their life easier, because digging into deeply doesn't make sense. There is an execution topic which is not related so much to the funds, but private investors that are also around in this market and looking at interesting investments and act as venture investors. Regarding exit, it's all clear. Venture investors entering the assets and can immediately at least start this public part and illuminate it and evaluate its capitalization and gradually prepare to exit at any other round where they want it. So maybe I would shift the emphasis slightly before I give the floor to other colleagues. How the Moscow Stock Exchange looks at similar activities in CEE countries, because you mentioned Germany, Western Europe, and on the other hand, in this conference, we'll have heads of Czech and Warsaw exchanges, and are they working on this as well? I cannot give any estimates because traditionally we don't comment our colleagues' activities, so I'll be neutral information, and all stock exchanges are working on this, and some created specialized segments specifically for work. It's not always innovative. There could be small cap companies and London project, New Connect or Warsaw Exchange, which is also interesting, and although it is changing not for the better, they all First Nova Scandinavian, Nasdaq OMX. So almost all stock exchanges of CE countries working on this, and I cannot comment and say that someone is better or worse because they are all specific, and some is more emphasis on the regulatory benefits from the state and compensations at the expense of the budget, etc., or it's purely market phenomenon. But the point is that the stock exchange needs it itself in order to grow this into companies, new companies, free float, new names. It's important for any stock exchange. Thank you, Gennady. So I would like you to be present at least or partially participate in the next session, because stock exchange activity is very important in terms of ventures outside of IT sectors. But we'll come back to that. Please, questions later. We'll go quickly over our structure of. And we'll have some time for questions. So let's look from the other side in terms of funds operating with entrepreneurs. This is other side of the market. So the first thought to our foreign colleague, representative of e.Ventures, Damian Doberstein.
Yeah, but I feel more comfortable to speak in English. Thanks again for inviting us here. I think it was also a very interesting introduction. But I have to say, we with e.Ventures, we are working in a completely different segment. We are actually really early stage focused. So we are a German-American fund, which is based in San Francisco and also based in Hamburg in Germany, with also now some regional funds here in Russia for Russia and the CIS region, and also with an Asian fund based in Beijing and Tokyo, and another Latin American fund based in Sao Paulo. We are investing here in the region since 2008. So we have 3 Ukrainian portfolio companies, and then close to 10 Russian portfolio companies, and we are really focused on the real early stage. So we are doing some seed deals, starting from whatever 500,000 euro, and goes up to 3-4 million euros. So classical Series A, classical Series B financing rounds. What can I say? Or maybe just for the introduction, maybe it's enough, and
maybe you could briefly assess how do you see different regions inside the CE. The CE. What is the role? Is Russia an overwhelming part of?
Okay. I see. We definitely see differences between, for example, Ukraine and Russia. I mean, the big difference is that Ukraine and also the Balticum, the local markets are normally too small to build companies which are really focused on the local markets only. Whereas Russia is, of course, a much bigger market, more inhabitants, fast growing, with also high internet penetration rates. So here are definitely some local opportunities. So we are looking at both, actually. So we are looking at some local opportunities here in big categories. For example, we invested in Zapato. It's the local Zappos, big shoe business. So we said, okay, this is an opportunity which we really like, and where we see very big potential locally. At the same time, we are also looking, of course, at companies which attract here the local IT talents, and which actually really build the core, the innovative core here in the region, but where actually the monetization potential of the eventual business lies in other markets. And so this is basically where we come in here and meet the local founders, discuss with them their plans, and actually invest locally, but then help them to go to America, for example, where we also can help them operationally with our San Francisco office, where we set up an American company, and where we then also hire head of sales, for example, to sell the software then in America. So we do both. And coming back to the question, Ukraine is probably a little bit more innovative, I would say, because the local founders are really forced to innovate, because they know we have to build something which is able to compete on a global stage, whereas Russia is having both. So you see some Russian entrepreneurs focusing rather on the Russian market, but you also see some very internationally minded entrepreneurs who do basically also the first step here and then go to America.
We made a survey among about 140 investors around the world, and we asked what are the most attractive regions in the CE for investment. So we had Poland, Czech, and Russia as the top three. Do you agree, like from the viewpoint of an international company, that these are the most interesting regions? And would you recommend entrepreneurs to raise funds in other countries, or starting business in Russia is the good option?
Okay, I mean these are basically two questions. The thing is actually, so we have a European fund, which is basically coming from Germany and now also coming to the Eastern European market, to Poland and Czechia and so on. And then we have a Russian fund here, which is basically now coming from Moscow also to a little bit to Eastern Europe. So we are looking from here, Ukraine, the Balticum, for example. It's very hard for me to say, okay, there's a market which is superior of the others, but what I said before, the types of the businesses are slightly different, and also accordingly the types of the entrepreneurs and their skill sets, I would say, because in Czech and in Poland, I think there are less kind of technology-heavy, innovation-driven companies which are really aimed to go to America after having done their core product and then going globally. So they are more locally focused, but as a difference to Russia, I think they are then actually trying to capture the whole CEE region. They actually maybe start in Poland, but then they go to Czech, then to Romania, to Bulgaria. So they try to cover all the different markets there, which actually is then also pretty interesting if you look at all the markets and the potential out of it. But the skill set and also the topics are much different. So we like everything, and we are ready to look at everything. But it's just different, not a matter of what is more attractive.
Спасибо. Надеюсь, что удастся.
Thank you. Hopefully, this conference will help you make introductions with some prospective entrepreneurs for your investment. Now, I'd like to take a look at this marketplace by a Russian eye, by the participants of the conference. I mean, the investment funds to be in the centerpiece of the discussion. VTB Capital Bank is probably one of the most intensive investors in this area. Aidar Kaliev is here at this table, who is responsible for investment at the VTB Capital Bank. What's your opinion? Thank you. I'll be very brief about our business. We are a classical venture investor. We invest into startups, in technologies. They may be of Russian origin, maybe relate to Russia in a way, which have leveraged Russian connection. They may be entrepreneurs working and living here in the Russian marketplace, and also Russian entrepreneurs living in other countries We have a series of successful startups abroad, founded by Russian and Ukrainian businessmen, and also the innovative companies who are willing to come to the Russian market because it's a rather vast one. We have 34 companies in our portfolio. It's probably one of the largest venture portfolios. We invest in both IT and the so-called high-tech. And certainly there is some specificity in both investments. As for the venture market, we should recognize this market at a very early stage of its development. The first classical venture fund was founded in 2007 by ourselves, together with a Russian venture company. Only 5 years have elapsed since. A certain road has been passed, but probably we still more time to understand whether this industry has been put on foot well. But the main question for me is whether it's possible to build a sustainable venture capital business in this geographic area. Every time when we try to answer this question, now it seems probably yes, we can. Because we see a lot of interesting companies which are engendered here. But I would like to dwell here on probably 2 points, just briefly. In my view, for this industry and this marketplace to come true, to become real, and we could discuss successful venture investment models in Russia, whether they are prospective. Well, for this, certainly, the final part of all the process is exits. There was an interesting presentation by MMV MySex, and it's great that there is such a mechanism, such an arrangement. Neither ERI or MySex cannot say right now that it has been already accomplished. The process is fairly fast, but still we have not reached the final point. I believe sooner or later we'll reach it. To me, there is a very important question. All of us sitting here spend a lot of time with businessmen, we invest. We also spend time with our investors. We try to convince them that they should offer us funds, and we'll be able to use those efficiently. But at the end of the day, we should set up companies which will be in demand for the marketplace when someone would like to buy those. Well, in principle, who would be capable to buy such a company? Well, first of all, the domestic market. I would say that the US data says that only 10% companies go for IPO. Let us dream probably of 10 or 20% as well here. What should we do with the remaining 10 to 12, 18%? It's a cornerstone question for me. The past record of 2 or 3 or 5 years has demonstrated that all the exits, let alone the IPO, but discuss rather strategic sales, that all the exits may be counted only with one hand. I think there is only one classical exit. What Damian said, that's a Zapata company which was sold to a zone. Let's take a look. Who, after all, in Russia, whether there are players in Russia who are willing to buy young businesses. They are first, the usual suspects are Yandex and Mail.ru. Mail.ru has become, Mail.ru as it is, such a high profile because it used to buy quite intensively other companies. We communicate rather proactively with both. For now, I have not got an impression that we speak a single language, common language with them. We speak rather different languages. You know, all the decision makers say, show us a company which would be ready for ourselves to be purchased. There is no such a single company in the market, they say. And it's easier for them to come up to a young startup and to offer good bonuses, compensation and options at the Yandex.ru, and they'll work for us more efficiently rather than in a young startup. For the time being, the buying culture for buying companies which would be able to add some value technologically and business-wise. We have not yet created this culture, and I believe it's one of the great objectives of the so-called ecosystem in this area, so that our national champions should learn how to buy companies, and they should not think that everything may be done domestically or in-house in a lab, rather than by another company. Well, it's a part of the exits. We should work on that, and we certainly have major companies like Ozone, KPV, and others, which will be able to acquire younger startups. There is another quite an extensive subject. That's buying local companies to international strategists. I think maybe Maxim from Intel Capital would be able to disclose the subject to wider, because Intel is a major player of the global ecosystem. But it's also a question to me. When international, global technology companies, or including probably internet companies, would come up and be by Russian startups in earnest. I believe it's a subject for debates for the future. I have some consideration myself, but I wouldn't like to take much of a time for that. To summarize, I would say that the marketplace is developing in a stormy way, quite intensively. Many components of the system are there. There may be venture and other stages already. There is an IPO site, which is an operation. We place there some of our companies there. Nonetheless, one of the key issues, I believe, is the exit strategy, so that at the end of the day, all these efforts be turned into a profit. During all this nutrition chain, everybody will be happy. Thank you, Aidar. My function here borders a bit on some homogeneity in my comments on what has been said, because every time I try to focus you on our covering the entire region. On the part of Russia, how do you say? To what extent Russia is regarded as a center of CEE, or you are inclined to associate yourselves with some other groups of countries? Well, I forgot to mention. I'm sorry. We generally associate ourselves with a global venture ecosystem. We are not focused solely on this region. We have two types of innovative companies which we finance. The first ones are local ones who are focused on Russia and maybe Ukraine. The CEE countries are a bit out of our focus for many reasons, primarily because of the language. Well, there is more or less one language here around. All other marketplaces, compared with Russia, when it has 150 million plus 60 million in Ukraine, well, all other marketplaces, seem a lower priority compared with these ones. And when I said that we see ourselves as a part of a global venture system, we believe that Russia can offer a lot to the global venture industry, because they are super talented engineers, super interesting technologies, which were founded, built on Soviet science, but we are rather more focused on global trends, on global innovations, rather than some, or in the CE market. Primarily, when we invest into a consumer business, the first thing we look at is Russia, then Ukraine, and then Kazakhstan. These are probably the priorities. Well, I cannot help agreeing with you that the size of the markets, for sales, Russia cannot be compared with the other CE countries, particularly if we take them individually. But in this regard, there is a common opinion that for venture businessmen in this, primarily in IT, in Eastern Europe, the unique chance for them to make at least anything is to focus on the global market and no less. Well, if viewed by Russian businessmen, how do you think? Can we confine ourselves in the Russian consumer market, or we should look globally? I believe, and my colleagues would probably be supportive of me, that it's very important for an entrepreneur to have a focus. If he's focused on a dozen of languages, which we see in the CE region, then it's probably a bit challenging. As for consumer businesses, if a Russian entrepreneur is focused on the consumers, then the first thing to be done, I believe, for him is to be successful first domestically, that is Russia. And by way of nature, he should go where the Russian language dominates, because all these internet-related consumer businesses, they are associated with the internet and the language of it. I've heard a lot that the CE region offers a lot of global startups. When companies think domestically, like Israel, for instance, Israel thinks globally all the time. Any Israeli entrepreneur thinks globally. He does not think of confining himself in Israel. Rather first go to the United States. And all the rest of the markets just follow. I think for Russians, the first priority should be to master, to tap the marketplaces where Russian language dominates. So I have several examples on hand of very successful companies which were focused in their strategy on the CEE region. For instance, the Baltic companies, we developed first in the Baltics, then Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, Romania, and they have set up quite interesting businesses. For instance, field management. There are some companies which have gathered maybe 10 or 20 countries, and they dominate in all those. It's a very good model, a very sizable business. I believe that the entrepreneurs in other countries are in a worse situation because they don't have such a vast market. Maybe it's so much the better for them. Thank you, Aidar. Now, I would like logically to give the floor to our colleague who represents a multi-profile investor investor fund. It's the Intel Capital Company, or an organization which has a lot of interest in many regions and in individual CEE countries, including Russia. So I'd like to give the floor to Maxim Krasnykh, who is responsible for this area in Russia and the CIS member states.
CIS, thank you, Vladimir. Welcome all, and thanks to organizers for inviting me. I would like to start with a few words about Intel Capital, and Aidar touched upon a number of interesting topics, and I will also comment. Intel Capital is a global venture investor, one of the major in the world. We have not the best PR because very few people know, but we annually invest from $350 to $150 million, invest around the world, for more than 52 countries. So talking about the region of Russia and CIS, then here we are present first from the beginning of 2000, and so become more active, because from 10 portfolio companies that we have in the region, 7 emerged in the our portfolio for the last 3 years. So that's one of the growth points, and we talked about venture market growth that in 2012 in Russia was about $900 million. That's a quite impressive number. Comparing with 2011, it was about $550 million. And the picture is under the world map here. If we see what happened in 12 in the venture investment market, it declined by almost 20% globally, by 15-16% in Europe and US, and out of 40 billion of venture dollars invested in 2012, about 30 were invested in the US. Chinese market declined by 40%, and Russia is one of the few markets that continued growing. Yeah, we are growing from a small base, but we are growing. It's a positive trend. So, talking about the history of our activity from '91, we are working with investments and we are part of Intel. And there are two components in our work. One related to strategic relevancy of our investment and main business of Intel is the possibility to see new technologies interested for our core business and help companies develop or make some systemic investment to help to commercialize new products and services. And that's financial component. In that sense, we are very similar to classical venture investments, where we count to exit the project with profit. So, coming back to the region, I would say we are very actively investing here, and we can see examples of both successful exits and our current portfolio, where almost 2 dozen companies, and not all are represented here. Talking about the focus and what we're looking at, which projects, probably in the context of Russian CIS region, almost 90% of projects that we look at are in two categories that Aidar already mentioned. First, related to domestic market, with the companies working in the area of internet services or e-commerce. And second, more innovative, related to development of software, mobile services, and other things. So two main categories which are clearly seen in our portfolio. Out of recent investments last year, we had 3 new investments in Russia, Spectuit, Rudy, Kupi VIP company. Kupi VIP businesses oriented on e-commerce, domestic, and Spectuit about speech technologies and focused on international markets, but have R&D in Russia. As Russia Connection, or leveraging Russia Connection, is also the topic that is clearly seen in our work in the regions. I'd like to mention our experience also in the Central and Eastern Europe, and we have a number of logos here, public companies that you see, EVG, LogMeIn, as companies from CEE, so both on public and IPO on US market. IMO is another company which is a player. Pan-Central European, that's one of the major internet stores that was sold last year. And I'd like to summarize and speak about some specific features of investing in Russia compared to CEE. Of course, there is significant overlap, and it does make sense to dwell on each more detail. We spoke about key growth points in Russia. This is a major domestic market, 250 million. If we talk about the whole region of Russian-speaking users, this is e-commerce market. It's only in Russia $12 billion. E-advertising $1.5 billion, and both these markets are growing very fast, and growth rates at the level of double digits for the next 3-5 years, which is interesting to investors. And speaking about Central Europe and Eastern Europe, that the market as CIS should be divided into separate regions and countries, and differences are significant. That's how it's difficult to compare Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. Same in Central Eastern Europe. There is a number of mid-sized markets like Poland or Czech Republic, where can create major companies focused on these two markets and potentially can be present in all countries of the region. Yeah, this region for global investors and US and European is interesting with this potential technological, which already shown itself if we look at companies like Skype, which was born from Estonia, or a company that I mentioned earlier, VG, LogMeIn, is from Hungary. So that's quite interesting markets, and like to be more like Israel in similar situation that domestic markets are not large, and if you want to create significant, successful, scalable markets, you need to be first oriented on external markets, and first of all in US and Europe. So we would like to see it more, projects like that, and in Russia as well. Then we can say that Russian market in some sense is spoiled with its size, and it's both good and bad. Good because, yeah, there's clear market where entrepreneurs are aware and they can develop significant businesses. At the same time, they are kind of relaxed because in terms of competition, it's hard to enter for others, and it doesn't motivate entrepreneurs to get the best experience from other countries and try to build companies that could be competitive on international markets. So difficulties as one difficulty and a specific feature of investment in this part of the world, which is characteristic both for Russia and Eastern Europe, related to the fact that markets are quite young and there is no thing like standard conditions of deal like in US. When you make a deal with an entrepreneur, you negotiate and bargain around putting, I mean, there are some framework, but you bargain in some range where you end up when you close the deal. So very few unstandard things that needs to be done each time the news. So that Russia and Eastern Europe are alike because there is no standard rules and conditions in terms of the deal, and for some entrepreneurs it's a first transaction in their life and they are not fully understanding motivation of the venture investor, what they want and how they think and why they do it. So this educational process that puts its footprint and both on the speed of work and success of this investment. So Aidar touched upon interesting topic of exits. I'd like to comment and give the floor to another participant, and I'd like to believe that in terms of exits, we are in situation quite similar to the market of FMCG in its beginning, when companies were created in Russia oriented on domestic demand, consumer demand, and sometimes there were no exits because people accumulated turnover and there was significant growth seen in the future and there was no time for exit. So if we remember mid-2000 or beginning 2000s, that's a period where FMCG was significant number of deals and the strategies of Pepsi and Cola came out and from different industries, and we've seen significant size of deals in FMCG. I think that this situation is similar slightly to what's happening now in the market of e-commerce and e-services in Russia on the one hand. On the other hand, this segment is less than FMCG market overall, so need to have some reasonable expectations here in terms of exit. So it seems to me that example of Yandex and Mail.ru, which are major internet companies in Europe, in terms of capitalization, it supported interest to this market from both strategies, and I think we'll see acquisitions by international strategic companies, and the situation where Yandex and Mail are not sufficiently purchased by companies. Many entrepreneurs don't like the situation because they need to work on the market where they understand the situation and they build a product and attract users, I can sell it. And there is clear buyers. So this situation is not existing now. So this adds some uncertainty, which nobody likes. And on the other hand, it is explained by entrepreneurship culture, which has not been developed yet. The situation will be changing, and both corporate players will understand that not everything can be done internally, and entrepreneurs will be more active and go develop products, and will be more difficult to attract, like with shares in Mail and Yandex. But these deals are happening in the US quite rarely, as entrepreneurs are motivated to create major business independently, but not under the wing of strategy companies. So we'll move into this direction as well. Thank you. Thank you, Maxim. I think that in our section we are missing some interaction, and it's not in line with the spirit of venture investment market. So please, some questions, especially we heard about some brands that brings emotions. So we can accept some questions. So please go ahead. Afternoon, Igor Kazakov. Maybe you comment this mismatch between what entrepreneurs come with and the requirement of venture capitalists. Briefly, what do you want from them and what they bring to you in terms of business and okay, let me try. This is also an interesting topic that the rules of the game in the market are not developed yet. The entrepreneur come and tell about one, and investor thinks about something else. So first, that thesis that I want to say that venture business is a very complicated business. Why complicated? Because the money invested by venture investors is not taken from the air. But venture investor goes through a cycle as entrepreneur. Once in 3-7 years, when they come to their own investors and say, please invest money into my funds, and I will return it with returns significantly over other market instruments. If we're talking about medium return instruments that these investors are focused on about 10%, then venture investment, in order to raise money, you need to offer 20-30%. If we say that we raise money for this geography where there is no success stories of venture businesses, then you need to return 20-30%. So what is 20-30%? Usually it's a 10-year fund. Let's take $100 million fund. In order to pay the management fee and incur all the costs out of 100 million, you need to make 300 million. In order to return this, and you have to invest into 10 companies, and there is a rigid mathematics that out of 10 companies, 5-7 will die, and 2 or 3 will give normal returns, and one should become a major that would cover it all. So, and the essence of venture investing, that you invest when you don't know which of the company will die and which one will become major. So each company that you invest should be potentially large and sufficiently large to cover the whole fund. I'm sorry, for 3 minutes I have to tell you about the concept of venture investment. So any company that you invest, they should have this potential. So an entrepreneur, if you invest in 10 million, potentially need to return 100 to 200 million. So entrepreneur can relate to it differently. First, they want 100 to 200, but if it's 20, it's not so bad, especially if the money is raised outside. So probably one of the key things is venture investor wants for each investment to make a lot, but understanding that there should be a lot of risks on the way, but investor wants to protect themselves, and there are different mechanisms. And in Anglo-Saxon law, this is a mechanism of shares, which is not in Russian law, and for hundreds years not available. At investor, at some moment when the project becomes not successful, they can personally make a decision about closing and take it all, using these preferences on these shares. And you know that there are many aspects like that. When entrepreneurs are far from that and they are not aware of this. So 2 weeks ago I was at Skolkovo at the conference, and there was a question what needs to be done for venture environment to develop. I think that we need to try to formulate the rules of the game between investors and entrepreneurs. So in US it's very easy. There are standard term sheets on 2 pages that are not changing for 30 years or changing very rarely. And when negotiations between investors and entrepreneurs take 5 minutes. And there's a venture business angel, Ron Cowie, most successful for the whole history. I know him, and he tells me that maximum that I spend on negotiation with entrepreneurs is 5 minutes. If we don't agree in 5 minutes, I know that we're not going to be together. Thanks, Aidar, and as calling to all entrepreneurs to think in broad sense, but also to investors. So now probably it's better to continue with presentations that are left over, and maybe we'll have some time for questions. So I'd like to give the floor to another investor. It is a young, fast-growing fund, LETA Group, presented by Alexander Chachava, and Technologic, the most innovative presentation, which is going to be if it is launched, and IT specialists, and it's going to be broadcasted online.
Good afternoon. Now it's in operation finally. It's not only innovative, but rather emotional, because it does not contain any number. Since our marketplace indeed is young and innovative, it's supposed to inspire us. I see the current situation in Russia. I'll certainly discuss mostly Russia because we operate mostly here. I see the situation as the glass is half full. Certainly we have certain obstacles, but I'd like to concentrate on what good we have in this country. When you ask same Americans what they know about IT in Russia, they say, yeah, you have very good designers, engineers. Many of them are employed by US major corporations. Everybody knows about hackers in Russia, how advanced they are. And the Russian engineering potential is indisputable. All of us say it's a great empire legacy, the legacy of our education in the past. It does not go altogether right away, but gradually it moves forward. There is one more driver I'm happy with, and it inspires me enthusiastically. Normally, when Russia is discussed, people say, yeah, you have cool engineers and very poor commercialization and poor management. Not accidentally, it coincided with a boom in our venture industry. And in effect, the level of technology startups, the ones focused on the global market, it's on the rise rather quickly. The level of management, marketing, and we witness fairly many startups which are indeed ambitious and unique. In percentages, I mean, the balance of Russian startups, I think Russia can compete with this indicator with the leading economies, maybe not quantitatively, but still it's on the rise, all of it. And I think we have very good potential ahead. Finally, we have learned how to start. We had great inventors back in the past, before Soviet time, who used to invent something in a garage or on a lap. And now attempts are being made to make business of that. Russia as a vast marketplace. Is it good or bad? Well, of course, there are more advantages, because Russia is not so vast. And now Mr. Smiths, our inventors, they are very ambitious, and these ambitions go rather beyond this sizable Russian market. Russia is quite large to generate innovations, but not so large to meet these ambitions. We've seen increasingly more startups which focus on the evergreen desire to change the world. And it fits in well in the concept of venture investment, because venture funds look for startups primarily, which should be ambitious to implement those ambitions. I would mention here several interesting startups, including our startups and those of our colleagues, which I refer indeed to such startups. As a matter of fact, there are a lot more of those, maybe 50 or 100. For the young venture industry, it's not little. I mean, the ambitious technology-related startups. Our two startups are display sets. It's a sort of an air display. This startup was engendered in Russia, rather in non-innovative region. I mean, Astrakhan. But already 2 rounds of investment have already accomplished, and they are moving full blow to the market to make money. Yeah, I think it's a good example of the innovative potential I mentioned. There is one more project, rather of a social nature. It's a social clock with more than 1 million users in Russia, which is about to go out to the global market, and which is aimed to change the idea of a clock, to redesign it, to add some social flavor to it. It's a unique project, I would say. And respectively, I do believe that the role of Russia in this venture investment is becoming indeed noticeable, where we are still a small one, but rather a full-fledged player in the global market. And I see that many international funds begin to invest more and more proactively in Russia. They are in a minority, but I think this trend follows quite well the overall global market trend. Dozens of percentages of growth. Russia probably is not that well reputed, but we do our best to look as much better as possible, and I would say, to look more friendly, and to try to show we are a good innovative marketplace, quite efficient and promising for investment, including from abroad. This is my positive speech, has come to its end. Well, certainly I could provoke some skepticism in the audience, but I'm at your service to answer any question. I can give you more details about our record. Thank you, Alexander. Prior to going to Q's and Days, I'd like to finish the presentations as a session, and it will be appropriate to do that with the presentation by the company. So far, either investors, in Russian or international investors have spoken here. Now there will be a representative of a consulting company, which is located somewhere in between, may take a different look at the market. I look the floor to Yaroslav Shatinok from Althaus company. Thank you indeed. It's not easy to speak about after the innovations. I also have some slides. For a start, I'd like to highlight, to give you the profile of our company. We operate quite intensively with a direct investment fund, venture funds. We perform comprehensive expertise of projects in finance, tax, law, and we work a lot also on transactions, how to tailor those. We have participated in several projects under the aegis of Aidar here. Aidar, we work with the EG fund. The one classical transaction was mentioned by Aidar. They said .ru, Zapata.ru. We work here with Azone.ru. So the past experience is quite extensive. I'd like to go over now from a practical area to a super practical one, and to discuss a bit how to structure deals. Aidar has said that many legal institutions in this country are capable to structure the transactions. But what we see in our own practice, if there is no limitation in using Russian jurisdiction, the majority of the foundations and founders of the companies, they choose the transactions which allow use primarily foreign law or common law in particular. 99% of the cases over the last year have seen that Cyprus as a priority jurisdiction has been used. Over the last several months, maybe many have heard about all the events in banking, which got expressed also in the growth of orders and work for our company. And I'd like to offer our current vision of the alternatives which may be used instead of Cyprus. First of all, I'd like to describe the conceptual structure of a venture deal. Then we'll consider the key criteria of a holding company, and then we'll discuss some specific jurisdictions. As for the conceptual structure, I'll touch upon mostly the Russian market here, because the primary experience of our company certainly is concentrated here. As a rule, we have an operating company in Russia which designs products. As a rule, prior to a transaction or during a transaction, a holding company is set up in a foreign jurisdiction where we have founders and the respective foundation. At the level of this holding company, an agreement is signed with shareholders, mostly in common law. What are the primary criteria we should keep in mind when choosing the appropriate jurisdiction for a holding company? These criteria are easy to keep in mind. We created the word SALT, the SALT of the criteria, so to say. S means shareholders matters. This is an opportunity to sign agreements in common law, to design a management company. A means administration matters. That the spending should match the effort in creating a company. We should perform in a quality way in a short timeline. L means logistics matters. We see in real life that foundations or entrepreneurs do not give adequate focus to it because of time zones, whether there is a direct flight and how long such a flight would be. And the last letter, T, is the tax matters. Last but not the least, well, if you look at Russia, it's like having a double taxation agreement with Russia and a nice local holding regime. As for jurisdictions, let's take a brief look at Cyprus, Singapore, Luxembourg, BVIs. If you look at the consolidated table of these criteria, Criterion 1, that is shareholders' matters, you can see that such jurisdictions as Cyprus, BVI, the UK, Singapore follow common law. It's very simple. When we discuss the Netherlands and Luxembourg, common law also may be used there, but a bit harder. As for administrative points, the simplest, cost-efficient ones are Cyprus and BVIs. It's a bit harder to set up a holding company in the UK and more expensive and harder in Singapore and Luxembourg. Logistically, the most convenient are European countries, Cyprus, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, the UK. Less convenient are the BVIs and Singapore. Tax-wise, I would say so far the leader is Cyprus. The following slides will give us more details about the jurisdictions. But if we take this slide, you can see there are 4 advantages in Cyprus. It has been an ideal jurisdiction as yet, very convenient in all aspects. Respectively, the latest trends, we can add probably the letter P. It's a political aspects, the pressure by the EU. Changes are well known now to changing the tax law, and many foundations and companies begin to think about other alternatives, other options. For a start, let's go back to Cyprus and consider why Cyprus was the best probably jurisdiction tax-wise. There are key aspects. The first one is the availability of very favorable double taxation agreement between Russia and Cyprus, and therefore the tax at source may be lowered down to 5%. The second important aspect is a good holding regime creation market in Cyprus, and the dividends to be received by a holding company in Cyprus is tax-free. I would say that the third thing, that there is no law at source in Cyprus, and dividends may be paid also in an offshore jurisdiction. Oftentimes, venture funds are structured in the Cayman, BVI, and other classical offshores. Now, if we switch to a potential alternative to Cyprus, let's take a look at the BVI. Well, I'd like to make a recession a bit to some other subject. In my presentation, I focus more on the venture market, and the key factors, driver there, are simplicity, that should be a simple structure of a company, non-expensive, inexpensive, while for major companies and transactions, such structures may be a lot more sophisticated. A key aspect in using the BVIs is that it's an offshore. This jurisdiction doesn't have a double taxation agreement with Russia. Therefore, such companies may be used on a limited basis if during the first years dividend payment is not in view. Such a structure may be made as a basic one, and after some years it may be transformed into something more complicated if further dividend payments are in view. I will not dwell on all tax issues. They are on the slide here. Let us discuss the UK now. The UK is an industrially advanced country in Europe, And the most interesting thing about this country is that, similar to Cyprus, the UK doesn't have a tax at source for dividend payment. But unfortunately, this jurisdiction doesn't work well with Russia, because there is an agreement between Russia and the UK. And the tax at the dividend tax at source may be lowered only by 10%. While with Cyprus and other countries may be lowered down to 5%. Some transactions show us an interest in these jurisdictions because it's closer to us than the BVIs. It's more clear to us. It may be used as a basic step in tailoring the structure of a company, which later may be also complicated if a dividend payment is scheduled. Another jurisdiction is Singapore. In recent time, it's becoming more and more interesting. Honestly, we have not encountered with it frequently in recent time. Therefore, the main characteristics of the jurisdiction are that there's an agreement has been in effect for several years between Russia and Singapore, where the dividend tax at source may be lowered down to 9%, similar to Cyprus. As I understand, Singapore enjoys quite a good holding company regime, so the dividends may be relieved of tax, and also no tax is paid when payments are made to an international jurisdiction. However, based on my talks with some colleagues in Singapore, it's a most advanced jurisdiction, and company creation cost also local authorities offer more careful criteria for mandating having a substance, real directors to have, real personnel, which increases the costs of maintenance for this structure, holding structure. As a matter of fact, you're right, Rostislav, but you touched upon one of the critical subjects of venture investment, how to structure transactions. Maxim also mentioned it in his presentation. Indeed, structuring a holding company, probably everything starts with it, with the word exit, and entrepreneurs underestimate oftentimes the efforts required to scrutinize a transaction features. That is why I'm happy that you've touched upon this issue. Hopefully, the relevance of it has become clear to the entrepreneurs involved here. Probably it will raise interest in breakaway section number 7, which is devoted on transaction structuring and some legal risks investors encounter and entrepreneurs encounter, not only in Russia, but also in the CEE region. I asked Gennady in earnest to participate in breakout session number 3, and I also asked you to participate in section number 7. Well, I certainly knew about this section, about this breakout session. That's why tiny legal aspects have been ruled out. But our colleague, Elena Petrova, will give more details about some legal aspects.
Yeah, this topic will be more broadly open. We are -1 minute, but there are some questions over there, so let's spend some time on questions. Yeah, please, question to Gennady. And I have a question. When you pictured the rocket out of 3 levels, and you said that you contribute to, the IPO board contributes and assists meetings of entrepreneurs and investors. I'm interested how this happens. I'm speaking to 70 funds, and yeah, we have little time, so I will not dwell on marketing and advertising of specific platforms. So we better exchange business cards and discuss it. But overall, it was a right question about different language between entrepreneurs and funds. We as a platform including our consultants and partners, we help to remove this barrier. We have different instruments. First, we need to make companies, projects to be structured appropriately so that they speak the same language, including some investment memorandums so that it is done right. Plus, we have some events where companies present to investors, and both online and offline, and webinars and different. There are meetings on MySex where we bring together companies and investors. So that's like Skolkovo when they have a number of funds and entrepreneurs. There's nothing new. We are specific that because we try to prepare companies to further public life, and there is certain charm and additional advantage that for all participants of this drama, for all funds also, they understand that it's easier to exit because it's initially built on some principles. Because not all the companies would go for IPO, maybe it's each 10th, and but if they include these principles of transparency in advance in corporate governance, then it would be easier to find a strategic investor. My name is Boris, and I have a question to Rostislav. Rostislav, when you said about Cyprus, you speak in the past tense that it used to be an attractive jurisdiction, but at the same time, there is opinion now that, yeah, we lost trust in the banking system of Cyprus, but not the tax system, because all the tax aspects are still on the agenda. How would you comment that? Let me comment. Really, the situation in Cyprus is two main areas. First is banking, and second is tax environment. It's known that there are certain changes. The corporate tax will be increased up to 12.5%. Also, defense contribution will be changed. Plus, we already see and when talking about Cyprus, it's more difficult to get tax residence certificates. So that's a key document that allows to make a reduced dividend rate when paying out of Russia. And plus, in the most pessimistic assumptions, we may not exclude there could be withholding tax, dividend tax, or change rules for exemption of received dividends. So if Cyprus went on this non-positive path, it's difficult to forecast here. So a lot of clients still stay in Cyprus and looking, but many already making steps and moving to other jurisdictions. All clients just creating their structure are not considering Cyprus as the right jurisdiction. I have a question to Gennady. Gennady, please tell me, you mentioned the sector of renewable energy. On one of the first slides of your presentation was seen, so I'd like to ask a question. Whether you're considering development of this sector in terms of creating a system similar to European, like trading of carbon emissions, or it will be other two-sided deals, and there's a number of innovative company sectors that includes everything related to innovations, and there was some breakdown. Those say that represented are related to this segment, but that this segment would be like a separate, it's not there. Moreover, Related to the issue that you mentioned, I'm not ready to answer because we work with assets and we support trade on these certificates. I don't have my own opinion, although I spoke to my colleagues and they used to have, but I'm not an expert on this. I cannot tell you competently whether there are prospects on that, because it's not my expertise. Hello, colleagues. My name is Svetlana Brykhovetsky, and I have a short question, but to few clients. First to Aidar. I'd like to know your personal opinion. Your business could be paralleled as insurance. With insurance, the risk is that the event will happen, and for you, that the event will not happen, that the company will not get profit or return. So what is the optimal portfolio for a fund in terms of number of projects comparable could ensure sufficient profit to investors? And another question to Gennady. How you position the market of innovation and investment that you created? It is excellent that it emerged, but do you position it as an IPO market in the future mostly, or secondary trading? So who ensures main liquidity at the secondary market? What is the free float? And how you control risks related to possible unfair actions of applicants? Let me start. I recently met one partner, Anderson Harvest, in California. We spoke what we do in Russia, and I say, like, how many companies you have in a portfolio? I said, if you look at the company that we actively invest in active status, we have 20 million plus investment and minimal stake of 20%. We have 70 companies. And I say overall, whatever is less than 20 million is another 60. So 130 companies in the fund, which is the most successful internet fund of venture industry. So there is no unified answer. And Intel, how many Intel has? 400 companies. It all depends on the strategy of funds and the quality of management, etc. First, thank you for the question. Serious and deep, I would say. Yeah, really, the balance of primary and secondary is a very thin line here, because separating primary and secondary is not possible. Company coming to IPOs is doing it for the purpose to have liquidity. Yeah, first some investors, and then the circle of investors change. But still, this is part of the whole complex. When the company entered the market, life starts with that. So this market of innovation and investment can claim this high liquidity because it is high. So that's the answer. We have a lot of retail entering, and it's a plus because they create liquidity and up to half, and the number of primary investors is quite large, even compared to large companies. So and a lot of placements with like 300, 350, 400 investors as compared to regular IPO where only a few institutional investors. It's a lot. So, but it's a minus because it's some surplus volatility. It's hard to manage because the market is volatile, and because a large problem is lack of long-term money. And it's available, but not so much as we wanted. And that's a separate topic of pension funds, which is separated from the market, unfortunately. And what we're trying to do is to change it. And regarding the topic as how to have quality companies and not fraud and empty companies. So we are afraid ourselves of that. I will tell you about sad thing that no regulator could track the company that's been with an evil intent or could be evaluated much larger than it represents itself realistically, because the market can make mistakes and have some pathological events are being captured. We have system of selection and expertise, etc. Moreover, what we did, it's important mechanism that enables with these additional competencies filtering in a more intelligent way, not by some rigid barriers as it is done in the main market where there is requirement to listing and they're quite straightforward and easy, and they cut off a large number of companies, especially talking about high technology companies. We consider between us some struggle with the regulators that they try to prove they need to trust us more and not necessarily to use these rigid formal requirements to our companies. That's about it. So as you noticed, we implemented high-tech venture development like SMS messaging at conferences, but we are the victims because everybody got an SMS with reminding about lunchtime. So if you want, we can spend a couple of more minutes to questions, but if you're hungry, we can finish. Maybe one last question? Okay, then we really finish on that. It was a very interesting session. I hope to see you on the 6th and 7th sessions.